Hey guys, so we're going to talk about point slope and slope intercept. These are two different formulas that we're going to use. Depending on what information we have, will determine which formula we're going to use. So if you take a look here, you'll notice that slope intercept is going to be when we have our y equals mx plus b. And this is very useful, especially when we're going to be graphing or if we have a graph. And so all of those are circled in the teal. Point slope, we're going to use specifically or mainly when we have those 2 points, because then we'll be able to find the slope and then use that point slope to get our equation in slope intercept form. And so that's where you really only need 1 point and the slope, or you can have 2 points and then you can find the slope and pick one of those points. And so all of those I have boxed here in like this black or greenish color. And then standard form is really good when you have intercepts. And so that's going to be where you have your x and y on the same side of the equal sign, and those are what I have outlined here in pink. For this first question, we have a slope of 4 and a point of -3 and -5. Since we have the point and the slope, we're going to use the point slope formula. Now remember, when you're using the point slope formula, we are only going to replace values for the point, which is represented by the x1 and the y1, and the slope, which is represented by the m. Everything else is part of the formula and will stay. So because I don't want to forget this, we'll notice the m has already been labeled, but I do want to take a moment and label my point as x1 and y1. Now if you would, push pause so that way you can try to substitute these values in on your own. Okay, how did you do? Double check, make sure that you have a -5 and a -3, or you change them both to a plus. Okay, from here, we're going to want to isolate our y, so that way we can go from our point slope to slope intercept. So before I move my 5, I'm going to go ahead and distribute the 4 and then subtract the 5. So once again, try this, press pause, and then we'll see how you do. All right, after distributing, double check, you should have y plus 5 equals 4x plus 12. And now you isolate your y. And that's going to leave us, we subtract our 5 from both sides. Our final answer of y equals 4x plus 7, which means our slope, notice our slope has not changed. It was given to us as a 4, and even in slope intercept, we still have a value of 4, but our y-intercept is now a 7. So you can write it as just a 7 or an ordered pair. Okay, so in this next problem, once again, think about your setup. Look at what you're given. Think about how it's going to look like when you put it into your formula. We don't want to have any errors. Notice there's fraction, there's a negative. So take that time to label. Our slope is already labeled. And then we go with y minus our first y value of -1 is equal to our slope of 1/2 times x minus our x value of 2. So once again, in that first part of the equal sign, we have that y minus -1, and that minus negative turns into a positive. So now we've taken our point and our slope and we put it into our point slope formula. From here, we want to go to our slope intercept. So same as before, the first thing we want to do is go ahead and distribute that 1/2. So that's going to leave us with y plus 1 is equal to 1/2 x, because 1/2 times x is 1/2 x, and then half times -2 is a -1. And then our final step is going to be to subtract that 1 from both sides, because it's a positive, so we do the inverse. And this is going to leave us with y, these are gone, equals 1/2 x. And then -1 minus 1 is a -2. I know some of you might be tempted to put a 0, but it's not, okay? All right, and then we'll notice that our slope is still 1/2. That should never change. And then our y-intercept has a value of -2. So same as before, you can write it just as -2, or if you want to write it as an ordered pair, you're welcome to do that as well. Okay, on this one, we have 2 points. And from those 2 points, we want to get our point slope form and our slope intercept form. Because I don't have my slope right now, we're going to have to go back and use our slope formula. So do you remember it? So it's going to be the change of those y values divided by the change of the x value. And once again, just to kind of help us avoid any possible errors, take those 10 seconds and label your ordered pairs. So when we're looking at the slope, and I'm going to use a space here in the middle, I'm looking at m is equal to my change in the y values divided by the change of my x values. And so we look and we say, okay, y2 and minus y1. So -2 minus 7. Then we're looking at the bottom, the change of our x values. So this is going to be 8 minus a -1. And so we have these negatives. We want to be careful. We're at -2 and we're going to subtract 7. So that's going to take us to a -9. And then 8 minus -1, that turns into a positive. So we have -9 over +9, which gives us a slope of 1. Now that slope's not going to change. Then we go ahead and we go into point slope. It doesn't matter which point you pick. I'm going to go ahead and choose to go with the first. And so my formula says y minus my y value, in this case is that 7, is equal to my slope, which we found here is a 1. And I'll go ahead, I'll put my slope in green here. Times x minus my x value of a -1. So that's our point slope. You're welcome to change that plus negative into a minus negative into a plus. And then same thing as we did before, from going to point slope to slope intercept, the first thing you want to do is distribute. So I'm looking at, we have y, I'm going to change that to black. Y minus 7 is equal to -x minus 1. And then you can add your 7 to both sides, giving us y is equal to -x plus 6. Because we've got to add the 7 to both sides. Okay, which means we have a y-intercept of 6. Or you can write it as the ordered pair. Okay, so the next problem is like this. You have 2 points, and you have to find me the slope, the point slope, the slope intercept, and then identify the y-intercept at the end. Okay, so this one's just like before. You have your 2 points. From there, you're going to find the slope, then your point slope, slope intercept, and then identify your y-intercept here at the end. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is find your slope. Remember your formula, not y equals. It's m equals. Okay, so I want you to find the slope on your own right now. Push pause, and then afterwards press play and you can check your answer. So push pause now. Okay, you should have gotten 9/6, which reduces to 3/2. If you didn't, go back, make sure that your minus, negative, you change them into plus signs. Okay, from here we're going to go ahead and go into our point slope. Once again, it doesn't matter which point you use. Push pause and give it a shot. Okay, so whichever point you picked, this is what you should have. So if you pick the first point, you should make sure you have that minus negative, because remember that minus negative will turn it into a plus. So this would be y plus 5 equals 3/2 times, and this would then be the sum of x and 3, because that minus negative changes the signs. If you chose to use the second point, then this is what you're looking at, where you have y minus 4 is equal to 3/2 times the difference of x and 3. But either way, whichever one you use, you're going to have the same equation for the slope-intercept form. So once again, put me on pause. See if you can find your slope-intercept on your own. Pause. All right, so this one, because we had a fraction, -9/2 and 4. I know a lot of you probably changed this into a decimal, but I didn't. I went ahead and I left it as a fraction. And so remember, 4 is the same as saying 4/1, and for you to combine fractions, you need a common denominator. So I'm going to do 2/2 because that's 1. I'm not changing the value, but I am getting the same denominator. So 4 times 2 is where I got my 8 from. 1 times 2 is 2. Now I can do my -9 and add it with my 8, where I get my -1/2. So that means I have a y-intercept of -1/2. All right. Let me know if you have questions.